You ever wonder why so many people in Gen Z seem drawn to extreme politics lately? Like one side is marching for climate justice, the other is following influencers like Nick Fuentes, and both sides are angry, frustrated, and convinced the system is rigged against them. Well, maybe they're not wrong. Let's start from the beginning. Gen Z didn't create the chaos they were born into. They inherited it. By the time they could vote or even understand politics, the world was already falling apart. Decades of decisions made by older generations, decisions about war, money, housing, and the planet, have piled up and landed right on their shoulders. Think about it. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan cost trillions of dollars. Trillions that could have been spent on education, healthcare, or fixing the environment. Instead, that money went overseas, and what came back was debt, instability, and a generation that grew up watching the news full of war footage before they even hit puberty. Meanwhile, back home, housing prices skyrocketed. Rent became impossible to afford. College tuition doubled, and salaries barely moved. So now you've got a generation of young people who did everything they were told. Study hard, go to college, get a job, and still can't afford the life their parents had. And when you've done everything right, but the system still fails you, it's easy to start thinking the system is the problem. That's where extreme ideas start to sound appealing. Now, enter the internet, the great amplifier of everything. Instead of turning on the TV and watching polite politicians debate, Gen Z scrolls through TikTok, YouTube, and X, where the loudest, angriest voices get the most attention. Influencers like Nick Fuentes figured this out early. They mix memes, comedy, and outrage into something that feels like rebellion. They talk directly to young men who feel lost, disillusioned, or ignored by mainstream culture. And they tell them, "You're not the problem, the world is." It's simple, emotional, and addictive. And honestly, that message works because it hits a nerve. Gen Z does feel abandoned. They see politicians arguing about culture wars instead of fixing housing or wages. They see corporations posting rainbow logos in June while underpaying workers year-round. They see an economy that's supposedly booming but can't even afford rent. So when someone comes along, even someone extreme, who says you're being lied to, it feels refreshing. It feels real. But here's the twist. Extreme problems don't always need extreme solutions. They need smart ones. Because when you build your worldview on anger and hopelessness, you end up in the same place that caused the problem in the first place: chaos. The truth is, Gen Z isn't extreme by nature. They're reacting to extreme circumstances. Political inequality, political corruption. These aren't small issues. They're massive. And they demand big, bold ideas, but not destructive ones. That's why a generation is splitting. Some are turning toward radical activism, fighting for sustainability, justice, or universal basic income. Others are moving toward reactionary politics, craving order, identity, and meaning. Both are responding to the same pain, just in opposite directions. And that's the story no one wants to talk about. It's not just about Nick Fuentes or anyone influencer. It's about a generation trying to make sense of a world that stopped making sense a long time ago. The system told them, go to school, get a job, buy a house. But the jobs don't pay enough, the houses are unaffordable, and the school loans never end. So when the old path doesn't work, people look for new ones, even dangerous ones. The scary part is, history shows this isn't new. When economies collapse and trust fades, people always start reaching for extremes. That's how populist movements rise. That's how nationalism and revolution take root. It's not because people suddenly become hateful, it's because they become desperate. So maybe the real question isn't, why is Gen Z extreme? Maybe it's, why did we hand them a world that made extremism look like the only option? Gen Z is angry, yes, but underneath that anger is exhaustion and a desire for meaning, fairness, and hope. They don't want chaos. They just don't believe the old systems can fix themselves. And maybe they're right, because if decades of endless wars, political gridlock, and corporate greed got us here, then maybe it's not Gen Z that's extreme. Maybe it's the world they're reacting to.